At midnight, the town was quiet, but from the cemetery came a voice. You buried me with lies.
The town of Elmsworth slept under the heavy sky. Children lay coiled in their beds, men and women locked their gates, and even stray dogs found corners to hide. But in the cemetery, one grave opened its mouth, not with earth or stone, but with sound. A voice floated out. The song was low, broken, and haunting. It carried over the roofs into the ears of anyone awake. You buried me with lies. You buried me with pain. Mr. Daniel, the night guard, dropped his torch. His knees shook as he pressed against the iron gate of the cemetery. He had been paid to protect graves from thieves, but no one had warned him about the dead themselves. The voice grew stronger. The words were clearer now. At midnight you swore, but truth cannot sleep. I will tell them all. I will tell them all. Daniel's breath came short. He knew the song was not for everyone. It was for the guilty. By dawn, whispers spread across Elmsworth. Traders at the market muttered. Women at the water tap shivered. Children whispered under their breath. Everyone asked the same question: whose grave had sung? But no one dared to go close enough to find out. The singing had only just begun. The sun rose over Elmsworth, but the town felt heavy, as though night had not truly ended. In the central market, traders unrolled their mats and spread out baskets of oranges, peppers, fish, and palm oil. Yet no one bargained the way they used to. Instead, voices lowered to whispers. "Did you hear it?" one woman asked, her eyes darting. "I heard," another replied, tying her wrapper tighter. "It was singing from the graveyard. My daughter swears she heard words." The men were not left out. A butcher paused while cutting goat meat. He said, "This is how it begins. First a song, then a curse." But not everyone was afraid. Young Michael, a curious boy of 15, listened sharply to the whispers. He sold sachets of water at the corner of the market, yet his ears were sharper than his business hands. He asked, which grave was it? But no one would answer. Fear made their tongues heavy. By midday, the story had grown. Some said the grave belonged to a widow. Others swore it was the resting place of a woman betrayed in love. But all agreed on one thing: the voice was real. Even the chief's palace was not free of the talk. Messengers brought word that the singing had reached his ears. Chief Bassi frowned deeply. He told his council, "Nothing good comes from a grave that sings. We must find the truth before night falls again." But Daniel, the night guard, sat alone in his small hut, trembling. He had heard the words more clearly than anyone else, and he knew someone in Elmsworth was hiding a terrible secret. Night was coming again. The grave would sing once more. Daniel could not eat. His wife, Rose, placed a steaming plate of yam before him. But the food smelled like earth, like wet clay from the cemetery. His hands shook so badly, he spilled his cup of water. Rose frowned. "You worked all night. What is this fear?" Daniel lowered his voice. "The grave, it sang, Rose. The voice was not of a stranger. It was someone wronged." Rose's face paled. She was not a woman who feared quickly, but the weight in Daniel's tone made her skin crawl. She pressed her hand to his arm. "Don't speak of it in this house. Spirits have ears." But Daniel could not keep quiet. He knew the voice had called out lies buried with the dead. And if secrets were rising, then Elmsworth would soon bleed truth. That night, he thought of his neighbors. Mr. Ekong, who grew rich too suddenly. Mrs. Clara, whose husband vanished years ago. Even the chief's family, who had their share of shadows. The song might reveal one of them. Or worse, it might reveal him. For Daniel carried a secret too, one buried in his past like a locked box, and if the grave sang again, perhaps that box would open. The sky darkened. He dreaded returning to the cemetery, yet his duty forced him back. As midnight drew near, he tightened his grip on the torch. The grave was waiting.
The wind rose in the cemetery, rustling the weeds that clung to the cracked stones. Daniel stood at his post, chest heaving. Then the voice returned, softer this time, like a whisper carried on smoke. Your hands are not clean. Your words are not true. Daniel staggered. He covered his ears, but the sound slipped through his skin into his bones. The grave was speaking to him directly. The song grew louder, and for the first time he saw movement. The earth on one grave shivered as though breath pushed beneath it. The stone shifted. Daniel's torch fell, firelight spilling across the dark. He wanted to run, but his legs were stone. The voice sang clearer now. One among you betrayed me. One among you hid the blood. The town will hear. The town will know. And then silence. Only the echo of his pounding heart. Daniel fell to his knees, gasping. He knew this was no accident. The grave had chosen to speak. It wanted its secret free. At dawn, he told no one, not even Rose, but word spread anyway, because others had heard faint echoes drifting on the wind. The market buzzed again. People spoke of curses, of witches, of promises broken at night. The chief summoned Daniel to the palace. You saw it with your own eyes, Chief Bassi said, leaning forward. Tell me the truth. Which grave sings? Daniel's lips trembled. I cannot say. The chief's eyes narrowed. Then the town will suffer. Michael, the sachet water seller, could not let it go. He was only 15, but curiosity burned brighter than fear in him. He followed Daniel secretly one night, creeping through the tall grass that lined the cemetery. From his hiding place, he heard it too. The song, the grief, but to Michael the voice was not terrifying, it was sad. It wept between its words like someone wronged, someone begging to be heard. They left me alone. They left me in pain. Michael clutched his chest. He wanted to know who was buried there. He wanted to free the truth. When the song ended, Daniel left in haste. Michael slipped closer, brushing away weeds, squinting at the faint names etched on old stones. But the grave that sang had no name, only a slab cracked across the middle. By morning, Michael told his best friend, Anita. It sings because it wants to be remembered, he said. Anita's eyes widened. Or it sings because it is cursed. Don't go back there. But Michael had already decided he would return even if it meant standing alone. In the chief's palace, whispers had turned to arguments. The elders sat in a circle, their voices rising. It is witchcraft, one shouted. No, it is truth clawing from the earth. Someone in this town is guilty. Chief Bassi raised his hand for silence. His face was heavy with thought. He remembered a night years ago, a secret meeting and the decision that had left someone silenced forever. Could this be connected? His wife, Madame Grace, approached him later in private. Husband, if the grave sings again, it may expose us. Chief Bassi stiffened. He had buried that memory, the way one buries poison. But poison leaks, even through soil. He called for Daniel again. Guard that place with your life, he ordered. If anyone dares to dig, stop them. Do you hear? Daniel nodded, but in his heart, he knew no guard could silence the dead. Children in Elmsworth were braver in the day than their parents at night. By afternoon, a group of them gathered near the cemetery fence. They dared each other to throw stones, to peek through the rusted bars. Michael stood among them, though his eyes were serious. He was not there to laugh, he was searching. "Go inside if you are not afraid," one boy teased. Michael pushed the gate slightly. It creaked like a groan. "I will," he whispered. The others gasped, but none followed. Michael stepped through, heart thundering. The graves lay in rows like sleeping people. He walked slowly until he reached the cracked stone with no name. He knelt, pressing his palm to the earth, and asked softly, "Who are you? What do you want to tell us?" A sudden breeze lifted dust across the graves. Michael swore he heard a faint hum, though it was still daytime. The others screamed and ran, leaving him behind. That night, Rose tossed in her sleep. Her husband, Daniel, snored beside her, but she turned restlessly, sweating though the room was cool. In her dream, she was standing in the cemetery. The cracked grave glowed faintly, and the voice rose clear and sharp. "Rose, Rose, why do you keep his silence? You know what happened. Speak, or the town will suffer." Rose screamed and woke, clutching her chest. Her wrapper was damp. She shook Daniel awake. "I saw it," she whispered. "The grave spoke my name." Daniel's eyes widened. "Say no more. Do not give it power with your lips." But Rose was trembling. She remembered the night years ago, the night her husband returned home with mud on his shoes and a look in his eyes she had never forgotten. She had buried the memory, but the dream dragged it out. When dawn came, Rose did not go to the market. She sat at the doorway staring into the distance. She wondered if the grave song would call her again.
Daniel dreaded returning, but duty chained him to the cemetery. Michael, stubborn in his curiosity, crept after him again, hiding among the shadows. Midnight fell. The voice returned, louder than ever, spilling across the town like smoke through cracks. "I was betrayed by those I trusted. I was silenced when I should have spoken. My truth lies under the stone." The song was no longer just sound, it was story. A woman's sorrow, a woman's rage. Daniel covered his ears, but Michael listened with wide eyes, drinking every word. Inside their homes, townspeople shook with fear. Some wept, others prayed. But all knew this was not madness. This was revelation. The grave fell silent. Daniel stumbled away, but Michael stepped forward, touching the cracked stone again. "I will find out who you are," he whispered. A faint hum answered, like approval. Michael told Anita everything the next morning. She slapped him hard. "Are you mad? Spirits do not play. What if it follows you?" Michael's jaw was firm. The grave wants justice. "Maybe if we help, the song will stop." Anita shook her head. "Or maybe it will pull you into the ground with it." Still, when Michael returned to the cemetery in the day, Anita followed reluctantly. Together, they scraped away weeds, brushing at the cracked stone. They found no full name, only faded letters. M.E.A. M.E.A. Anita frowned. Could it be Mercy? Megan? Who knows? Michael's eyes lit up. "We'll ask the old people, they'll remember." But when they asked in the market, faces turned away. The name made lips tremble. No one wanted to speak. That silence told Michael everything. This was a secret Elmsworth wanted buried. In the chief's palace, Madame Grace could not sleep. The voice haunted her, though she had not gone near the cemetery. Each night, it seemed to rise through her windows, pulling her from her bed. One afternoon, she snapped at her maid. "Close the shutters. I don't want to hear that grave again." The maid looked at her in surprise. "Madame, the grave only sings at night." Grace froze. If the maid had not heard, then the song was calling her alone. Her chest tightened. She went to her husband. "Chief, we must leave this town." But Chief Bassi shook his head. "Leave? And let the people whisper that we ran from the dead? Never." Grace lowered her voice. "Then at least confess before it destroys us." The chief's eyes hardened. "Silence. Do you want to ruin me?" But in her heart she knew
the grave sang for them. That evening in the market, Michael and Anita found an old man, Okon, tapping a drum with his frail hands. He was known for stories. Michael crouched before him. "Grandfather, do you know the name Mia?" Okon's hands paused, his eyes clouded. Slowly, he said, "Once long ago, there was a young woman named Miriam Ekanem Akpan. She was beautiful, kind, and betrayed." Michael leaned in. "Betrayed how?" Okon's drumbeat faltered. "She was promised love, but given sorrow. She was silenced when she could have spoken. Some say the town's leaders knew and buried her story with her body." Anita's mouth dried. "And now she sings?" Okon closed his eyes. "Yes, for the dead cannot rest when truth is chained." Michael looked at Anita. At last, the grave had a name: Miriam Ekanem Akpan. Daniel could not hold it anymore. The more the grave sang, the heavier his chest became. One night, Rose found him sitting outside with his face buried in his palms. "I know her," he whispered. "Who?" "The one in the grave, Miriam. I was there the night she died." Rose's breath caught. Daniel's words came like stones tumbling downhill. It was many years ago. She had discovered a truth about the chief and his council. She wanted to speak, but they feared her tongue. They asked me as guard to keep her quiet. I thought it was only to frighten her, but things went too far. She never returned home alive. Tears rolled down his face. I helped bury her at night in that cracked grave with no name, and since then, my soul has not rested. Rose's body trembled. She wanted to scream at him, but her tongue was heavy. "The grave sings because of me," Daniel whispered. Michael could not keep Miriam's name secret. At the water tap, he told a group of women what the drummer had said. Soon the word spread like fire on dry grass. "Miriam Ekanem Akpan, that's who sings from the grave." By evening, everyone in Elmsworth knew. Some said Miriam was betrayed in love. Others claimed she knew the chief's deepest sin, but no one denied that the grave sang her truth. Chief Bassi heard the name and slammed his staff to the floor. Who dare speak it aloud? That name was buried with her. But his council members shifted uneasily. If Miriam's voice grew stronger, their secrets would no longer stay in the ground. That evening, Michael told Anita that the whole town knows now. Miriam will not stop until justice comes. Anita shivered. Then, the grave will never stop singing.
The entire town gathered outside their homes when midnight came. No one could sleep. They waited, breathless, for the voice. And it came, clearer than ever. "You buried me with lies. You buried me with silence. But truth cannot rot. It will rise even from the grave." Children clung to their mothers. Men clenched their fists, though fear weakened their legs. The song rose and fell like waves of sorrow, but this time it ended with a vow. "I will sing until my betrayers are named, until justice walks in Elmsworth again." The silence afterwards was worse than the song. People turned their eyes toward the palace, toward the chief. Daniel, standing by the gate, wept openly. He knew his time was short. Chief Bassi called his council at dawn. His face was red with anger. "This child, Michael, has stirred fire where there should be ash. He must be silenced before the grave grows louder." But one elder shook his head. "Chief, silencing him will not stop Miriam. Her voice grows stronger each night. Perhaps it is time we confess." The chief slammed his fist on the table. "Never! If we confess, we lose everything. Our power, our name, our respect." His wife, Grace, stood in the shadows, wringing her hands. She wanted to speak, to beg him to let the truth free, but fear of his rage sealed her lips. The chief ordered Daniel to find the boy and warn him, but Daniel hesitated. He could not silence Michael, not again. That night, Daniel chose his side. Michael stood at the edge of the cemetery again, torch in hand. Anita begged him not to go. "The chief will come for you. Let it rest." But Michael shook his head. "Miriam trusted us. She sings because she knows we will listen. If the elders are cowards, then the young must speak." He stepped inside. The cracked grave glowed faintly in the moonlight. He knelt, voice steady. "Miriam, we know your name. Tell us who betrayed you. Tell us what you want." The wind rose. The hum deepened. For the first time, the grave shifted as though someone below turned in the earth. A voice filled the night, low and sharp. "I want truth. I want their names spoken. Then I will rest." Michael whispered, "Then I will speak for you." And the grave sighed like a soul relieved.
Daniel could no longer live with his guilt. That night, he returned home and told Rose, "I must speak, or the grave will destroy us all." Rose grabbed his hands. "If you speak, the chief will kill you. If you keep silent, the grave will curse you. Which death will you choose?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I have lived with one death already, the death of Miriam. I buried her with my own hands. I cannot bury the truth as well." Rose sobbed. "Then let me leave this town before you do it. I will not watch you drag you to your grave." But Daniel shook his head. "I must face it." At dawn, he went to the chief's palace, his heart pounding. "Chief," he said, voice steady, "the grave sings because of us. We silenced Miriam. I cannot hide it anymore." The chief's eyes blazed. "If you open your mouth, you are finished." Daniel bowed his head. "Then let me be finished. At least my soul will rest." Michael knew the chief and his men would never confess, so he decided to gather the town. "If the grave wants names spoken, then the people must hear them," he told Anita. Anita trembled. "But you are just a boy. Who will believe you?" Michael's face was hard. "Miriam believes me. That is enough." He began whispering to friends, neighbors, traders at the market. By nightfall, dozens were ready. They would meet at the cemetery when the grave began to sing again. Anita followed reluctantly, but in her eyes there was growing courage. "If you fall, I will stand with you," she whispered. Michael nodded. He was no longer just a boy selling water. He was the voice of the dead. That night, the cemetery was crowded. Men, women, even children gathered behind the rusted gate. Daniel stood trembling at the front. Michael held his torch high. Midnight came. The voice rose. "I was betrayed by those in power. I was silenced by the ones I trusted. I will not rest until my story is told." The people shivered, eyes fixed on the cracked grave. Michael stepped forward. "We know your name, Miriam Ekanem Akpan. We know you were wronged. Tell us who betrayed you." The wind howled. The earth shook. Then slowly the voice sang. "Chief Bassi, his council, and the guard who carried me." Gasps filled the night. All eyes turned to the palace. The chief's name was spoken. The grave had named him. The crowd erupted. Some shouted for justice. Others ran in fear. Daniel collapsed, clutching his chest, tears pouring down his face. "It is true. I was the guard. I carried her to this grave. I did not know they would kill her, but I helped bury the lie." The people roared in anger. They surged toward the palace, demanding answers. Chief Bassi stood on his balcony, face pale but defiant. "Lies," he thundered. "This is witchcraft. Do not listen to a boy and a madman." But the people were no longer afraid. The song had broken their silence. Madame Grace fell to her knees, weeping. "Husband, stop fighting. You know it is true." For the first time, Chief Bassi's mask cracked. His eyes burned with rage, but beneath it was fear. The grave had stripped him bare. The morning after the chief's downfall, Elmsworth was split in two. Some villagers wanted to drag Chief Bassi into the streets for punishment. Others, especially his loyalists, argued he should be spared. At the market, traders shouted across their stalls, "He killed Miriam," one woman cried. Another shook her head. "Do not forget, he built our roads, brought wealth. Can we throw all that away?" Fear simmered, because if a leader could bury truth and escape for so long, who else carried hidden sins?
Michael watched the arguments with heavy eyes. This is not just about the chief, he told Anita. It is about all of us. Miriam's grave sings because we let silence grow. That night, the grave hummed faintly again, but this time its tone was softer, almost waiting, watching what the town would choose.
Rose could no longer hide behind her husband's shadow. She too had carried silence. She remembered the night Daniel came home with mud on his shoes. She had asked no questions, had accepted the wealth and peace that followed. And now the grave called her a keeper of secrets. In her sleep, Miriam's voice whispered, "You too were silent. You too kept my truth buried." Rose woke sobbing. She confessed to Daniel, "I knew, but I pretended not to. I let fear guide me." Daniel held her close. "Then we both share the blame, but maybe together we can help the town heal." For the first time in years, Rose felt her husband's heart lighter. She realized truth, though painful, was the only cure for the curse. By now, Michael had become the voice of the people. Everywhere he went, children followed. Men asked questions. Women touched his shoulder for courage. He stood in the square, raising his torch. Miriam sang so we could remember. We must not let her name die again. She was wronged, but her truth can save us. The crowd echoed him, chanting Miriam's name. Anita stood by his side, proud and afraid all at once. Michael was no longer just his friend. He had become the bridge between the living and the dead. That night, when the grave sang, the voice sounded calmer. "My name is no longer dust. My story breathes. Justice has begun." For the first time, some villagers wept, not from fear, but from relief. The chief sat in his palace, abandoned. His guards had fled, his council had scattered, even his wife had locked herself in her chamber. He sat staring at the staff of power, the same staff that once silenced an entire town. Now it was nothing but wood in his trembling hands. The grave song drifted through the night air, and for the first time, Chief Bassi heard it not as a curse, but as judgment. "You silenced me, but I will not be silenced. You buried me, but I rise in song." The chief covered his ears, but it was useless. Miriam's voice lived in his bones. He whispered broken, "Forgive me." But the grave gave no answer. The council of elders gathered once more, shaken. The people were restless. Justice demanded. Elder Udo spoke, voice trembling. "We cannot kill the chief without blood staining us further, but we cannot leave him unpunished." Another elder suggested banishment. Let him live with his shame, stripped of power. Let him face the song every night with no roof strong enough to silence it. The others nodded slowly. It was decided. Chief Bassi would be exiled from Elmsworth forever. When the judgment was announced, the people cheered. Some wept. The grave song rose again that night, but softer, almost like a farewell to chains breaking. For the first time, Elmsworth breathed freely. The day of exile came. The townspeople gathered at the square. Chief Bassi was stripped of his robes of office, his staff broken across the elders' knees. He was dressed in plain cloth, no longer a ruler, only a man. Daniel stood in the crowd, his head bowed. Rose wept quietly beside him. As Bassi was led away through the dusty road, the people shouted Miriam's name. Some threw sand, others simply turned their backs. Bassi stumbled once, glaring at Michael in the crowd. But Michael did not flinch. He held Anita's hand tightly. The boy who sold water was now the boy who carried justice. That night, the grave sang differently. "The betrayer is gone. Truth has walked among you.
I rest easier now." The song still carried sorrow, but its edge of rage was fading. Daniel knew exile for the chief was not enough. His own hands had carried Miriam's body. He must confess openly. He walked to the square where people still gathered each evening. He raised his voice, trembling. "I was the guard. I carried Miriam when they silenced her. I was weak, and fear ruled me. Forgive me." The crowd murmured. Some spat, some shouted, but others nodded. His tears showed his truth. Michael stepped forward. "He has confessed. That is what Miriam wanted. Let us not bury him too, but let him live as a warning." The elders agreed. Daniel was spared, but stripped of his position. From that day, he became a humble farmer, his head always bowed. That night, the grave sang more softly. "He has spoken. The truth breathes. I rest." Weeks passed. The grave song grew fainter. But one night, Michael and Anita lingered near. The voice rose gently. "I was once in love. I was promised a future, but lies stole it. Tell the young, guard your hearts with truth. Love without honesty is a grave." Michael and Anita exchanged glances. For them, the song was no longer a curse, but a warning wrapped in sorrow. "Do you think she will ever stop?" Anita whispered. Michael looked at the cracked stone. "When her story is remembered, she will rest." And so they promised to tell her tale to every child, every friend, until Miriam's name was no longer dust. The elders decided Elmsworth needed cleansing. They declared a festival in Miriam's memory. Drummers played. Women wore white wrappers, carrying calabashes of palm wine. Children danced, chanting her name. At the cemetery, they placed fresh flowers on Miriam's grave. The cracked stone was cleaned, and her full name carved upon it, Miriam Ekanem Akpan. The grave hummed faintly, almost like a sigh of relief. For the first time, the people of Elmsworth felt peace. The grave still carried a voice, but it was no longer haunting. It was a blessing. Madam Grace walked to the cemetery one evening. She placed her hands on Miriam's stone. "I stayed silent when I should have spoken. Forgive me." The breeze shifted. A soft hum brushed her ears. "You too were caged by fear. Live free now." Grace wept. For years, she had carried her husband's secret. Now she felt lighter. She returned home not as a chief's wife, but as a woman freed from chains of silence. One night, the town gathered again, waiting for the song. Midnight passed. The grave did not sing. People held their breath. Was it over? Then, just before dawn, a final whisper rose from the earth. "I am heard. I am remembered. I rest." And with that, silence. True silence. The kind that felt like peace, not fear. The town exhaled. The singing grave was no more. Years passed. Michael grew older, but he never forgot. He became a teacher, telling the children of Elmsworth the story of Miriam, the grave that sang, and the danger of silence. Truth, he told them, is stronger than earth. You can bury it, but it will rise, even in song. The children listened with wide eyes, their voices echoing Miriam's name, so she would never be lost again. On the 10th anniversary of Miriam's festival, Michael walked alone to the cemetery. He placed flowers at her grave. For a moment, the wind stirred. A faint hum brushed his ears, gentle, almost like a lullaby. Michael smiled. "Rest well, Miriam. Your song lives in us now." And with that, the grave was still forever. Elmsworth had learned its lesson. Silence is the heaviest coffin, but truth will always sing.